Of course, the output of the fish was also one of the criteria. Now, can you tell me how I made these fish famous? Seeing the fish being taken away, Jiang Hai looked at Prawalton and asked with some doubts. He really didn't understand now. Just now he thought about it. Did Prawalton mean that he didn't care about Wall Street and forcibly raised the price? But this was impossible. Why would the people buy it? Some people would say that he was happy to sell it this way. One side was willing to hit and the other side was willing to be hit. In the past, Jiang Hai had read a lot of farming novels in China. The protagonists in those novels all started off by planting radishes, cabbages and so on. After they were planted, they directly ignored the market price and sold a radish for more than 100 renminbi. Then people would go crazy and fight for it. At first it was quite cool, but later Jiang Hai knew that it was not possible because this was considered a way to break the law of the market. In China it was not allowed to sell things at a high price or a low price. This was breaking the balance of the market. It was a malicious competition. Although there was no such thing in the US, a red fish cost $10 per kilogram. How could it be sold for $30 and triple the price? If it was Jiang Hai, he wouldn't buy it. Just good quality is not enough. This is different from beef. Special quality is commercial. The difference is obvious. Jiang Hai's fish is healthier, more delicious and more nutritious. But in the US, fish farming is not popular here, so the fish are all wild. The difference between these wild fish and Jiang Hai's fish is not particularly big. At least, Jiang Hai didn't feel that the price difference was 3 times. Naturally, no one would buy it. Everything has to be advertised just like your cattle. If we didn't go to the New York Beef Show, we wouldn't have seen it. And your fish is the same. You have to go to the fishing show. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said to him with a smile. She is quite confident in Jiang Hai's fish, especially after tasting it personally. From the perspective of a businessman, selling it for 3 times the price may be a loss. Jiang Hai shouldn't have raised these red fish. He should have raised more valuable fish. If he had raised fish of grouper and above, then now Jiang Hai's income would be much higher. No matter what it is, branding is very important. If your cow wins the gold medal at the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, then we will have more reasons to raise the price of your beef cattle. It's the same for your fish. If you can win the gold medal at the fish exhibition, plus the original taste of your fish, it won't be too much to sell it for $30 a kilogram. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a serious face, and hearing her words, Jiang Hai also thought carefully. Fishing show? When is the fishing show? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai decided to study this first. It's better to ask about the time first. After the spring he will have a lot of work here. The Boston Fishing Show should be in the middle of April. After you go to Texas to attend the beef show, you can come back just in time to attend the fishing show. After thinking about it, Prawalton was not too sure. Although sometimes she would go to see if there was anything good that could be introduced to Sam's Club, these things were basically reminded by her assistant. She really can't remember the time. Jiang Hai can also understand this. Time slowly passed while the two were discussing. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Chia, Chijia, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian also came back. When they saw Prawalton and Cheryl Lee in the villa, they were stunned because they really didn't know that they would come. Really, you didn't tell me that there were guests at home. I'll prepare dinner. The first to react was Chia. She smiled and said to Jiang Hai, then she was going to the kitchen to prepare dinner, but Prawalton also stood up at this time. Oh, we are all sisters. You don't have to be so polite. Cheryl, let's go help. The moment Prawalton finished speaking, the atmosphere in the villa was not very good, and it was instantly silent. Then Chia and Chijia took the initiative to arrange 2 rooms for Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. But they asked to stay in the same room. Chia and Chijia didn't care about it. After the arrangement, Chijia went directly to Jiang Hai's room. This was also a declaration of sovereignty. At least she had to rely on Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. Her relationship with Jiang Hai might be closer. In this regard, Jiang Hai had no other way except for a little headache. He was really weak in dealing with relationships. After returning to the room, he naturally stayed with Chijia. They took a shower first, then did some exercise and took another shower. When the two hugged each other and were ready to sleep, it was already 11 o'clock in the evening. Isn't this Prawalton a lesbian? What? Did you take her down? Curling up in Jiang Hai's arms like a kitten, Chijia looked at Jiang Hai and said with a look of contempt. Jiang Hai was really not picky. As long as he saw something good, he would eat it. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know how to respond. Could it be that his charm couldn't be stopped? Don't joke around. Ugh, hee hee, these are all accidents. but after the accident there will be some trouble. But between her and me, it is estimated that we will never be together. After all, the forces she represents are not the same as mine. I don't want to be annexed by the Walton family. But she told me something today that is worth considering. Looking at Qi Jie in front of him, Jiang Hai wisely chose to change the topic. What did she say? Hearing Jiang Hai say that Prawalton's proposal was worth considering, Qi Jie couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and ask him. She was really afraid that Prawalton would make some excessive demands. She asked me to set up a company or brand for this Soaring Dragon Manor, and then participate in various exhibitions. After making a name for myself, maybe I will earn more. The price of fish this year is not very good. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie's first thought was to oppose. After all, this was Prawalton's proposal. As a love rival, it was inevitable for her to oppose all her proposals, but she was a highly intelligent person after all. Thinking about it, she also understood that Prawalton did this to make more money, and Jiang Hai can also make more money. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but hesitate, although she knew that Jiang Hai didn't care much about money. But it was really not good to not earn money. And most importantly, Qi Jie always hoped that Jiang Hai could do something serious. Instead of staying at home all day, doing some improper things with Aphrodite and other little sluts. A man should still prioritize his career, so now when she heard Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie really didn't know what to say. I don't know much about these things. If you want to ask, you can ask my sister. In the end, she decided not to express her opinion. If it was some medical things, then she would naturally not decline, but now it was business things she really didn't understand much. Asking Qi might be a good choice. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment, he really didn't understand. So he picked up the phone and dialed Qi number. Although it was dark in the United States now, it was noon on the other side of the ocean. Qi had just finished dealing with a matter. At this time, she was sitting in front of the coffee table in her office, drinking the tea that Jiang Hai brought back for the new year while looking at the foggy sky of the capital. But the weather was not good. Qi mood was still quite good. First, because the cheese company had officially stepped on the right track, and her revenge had been taken last year. Second, because the relationship between Jiang Hai and her was indeed developing in a good direction. In the case of a good relationship, the business was also quite good. No wonder Qi mood was very good. In the past few days, her mood had been very good. Occasionally at night she would think of Jiang Hai and feel a little lonely. I really wish I could just quit my job and stay by his side every day. She stretched and picked up her phone. She didn't know when, but the screen of her phone had changed to a photo of Jiang Hai. However, the image of Jiang Hai in the photo was not very good. At this time he was squatting in the snow, holding a sweet potato in his hand and eating it. Coupled with the outdoor clothes he was wearing, he did look a little tattered. Who would have thought that such a guy was worth tens of billions of yuan? This photo was taken during the new year this year. Once, Jiang Hai was waiting for her downstairs. Maybe he was a little hungry, so he bought a roasted sweet potato and ate it there. When her car drove to the opposite side, she happened to see this scene, so she took a photo and used it as a meme. Looking at the photo of Jiang Hai pouting and frowning while eating the sweet potato, it could be said that he was not handsome at all. If it was anyone else, it would be an absolutely ugly photo, but in Qi eyes he was so cute, so handsome, so free and easy, and not pretentious at all. She had to admit that the phrase, "beauty is in the eye of the beholder," was really true. Her fingertips gently stroked Jiang Hai's photo, and Qi looked at him so infatuatedly. But at this moment suddenly a phone call came in. When she saw that the screen was black, Qi frowned subconsciously. She wanted to see who dared to disturb her time looking at Jiang Hai. But when she found out that the number was Jiang Hai's, she couldn't help but smile. "Hello, Jiang Hai." She immediately picked up the phone, and Qi happy voice also passed into Jiang Hai's ears from the other side of the phone. "Hello, Qi, what are you doing now? Are you busy? Have you had lunch?" As for Jing Jin, after the other party hung up the phone, he seemed to have lost his soul and was somewhat powerless. Sorry, if you have something important to do, I can arrange for you to return to China as soon as possible." Looking at Jing Jin sitting there powerlessly in the dark night, Jiang Hai thought for a while, then coughed dryly to remind her of his location and then said to her. From the call just now, it was not difficult for Jiang Hai to guess that there should be something wrong with Jing Jin's other half. If because of his own affairs the other party's relationship was delayed, then Jiang Hai felt that it was a little unnecessary. "Oh, it's okay, I'll go back to my room first." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zheng Jin was stunned for a moment. Then she turned around and glanced at Jiang Hai. After that, she turned around and walked directly to the second floor and returned to her room without saying anything. She looked like she didn't want to say anything more. Jiang Hai also scratched his head. He had to listen to Qi Li's opinion on this matter. He turned around and returned to his room on the second floor. At this time, Qi Li had already fallen asleep. Jiang Hai also took off his pajamas and went to bed. Just like that, he hugged Qi Li and fell asleep. The next day, Jiang Hai was woken up by Qi Li's hair. When he opened his eyes, he found that Qi Li was lying on top of him at this time, using her hair to sniff his nose. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai woke up in the morning, and his big brother also woke up. Realizing that her lower body was different, Qi Li's pretty face couldn't help but blush, but she didn't dodge. Looking at her appearance, what else was there to say? The flames of war ignited in the room again. When the flames of war on Jiang Hai's side were extinguished, it was already past 9 in the morning. Are you a dog? Can't you eat enough? Lying on top of Jiang Hai, Qi Li gently patted Jiang Hai's chest and then said softly. At this time she was sweating all over and her body seemed to have no bones. She was soft and had no strength at all. Oh, that depends on what you eat. Touching Qi Li's smooth back, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li buried her head deeper. She liked how Jiang Hai treated her, she really liked it. By the way, what's the matter with Zheng Jin? When I came back last night I found her on the phone. It seems that the other party is her boyfriend or someone else. Didn't her family allow her to come? Then let her go back. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai remembered Zheng Jin's matter last night, and couldn't help but ask Qi Li. Jiang Hai didn't want to keep a person who didn't have any intention to help him, and he still had to pay her a salary. Sigh, this matter is indeed a little troublesome, but we can't let her go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but sigh, and then told Jiang Hai. Therefore, in the book, the highest rank that appeared was the division level. However, it was still very easy for a division-level official to deal with a billionaire. Well, just take it as easy. Anyway, Jiang Hai did not dare to return to China to develop. He was really afraid that when he woke up, his manner would become someone else's. This was the difference between the official status and the gold standard. The gold standard looked more red and cruel. It was like a pack of wolves. If you want to survive, you have to find food and eat other animals. When you become the strongest wolf in the pack, you will be the wolf king. The official status was like an official who was herding a flock of sheep. In his eyes, these sheep were treated equally. If he liked any of them, he would help them. However, they were still a flock of sheep. For the rich, the gold standard was much better than the official standard. At least they could ensure their own safety. However, for the ordinary people, the official standard was actually more conducive to governance. It was more stable and there would be fewer conflicts in society. This was what it meant to not worry about scarcity but about inequality. Well, Jiang Hai was a little off topic. However, now he was relieved because the biggest issue of the year was solved. Unknowingly, Qi Li had been with Jiang Hai for almost half a month. During this time, Jiang Hai and the others had been busy building the company, preparing the beef cattle to participate in the Texas All-American Beef Cattle Show, and dealing with the matters in the manner. Zheng Jin, who was recommended by Qi Li, was really good. She had learned a lot after being with Qi Li for so many years. Her fluent English made it easy for her to live here. In addition, with Jiang Hai's influence in Boston, at least Zhang Dihai and Moses Adams would definitely take care of her. Under such circumstances, Zheng Jin's efficiency was really high. It was as if the things in China didn't affect her. She set up the company, renovated the company, bought tables and chairs, met the employees and so on. It could be said that Zheng Jin easily arranged these tasks in an orderly manner. After watching her for a week, he found that she was really good at this. Jiang Hai signed a contract with her. Jiang Hai hired her to be the CEO of the Tinglong company. There were only two main categories of work: publicity and transportation. Publicity of the beef and seafood produced in Jiang Hai's Tinglong manor. Transportation was responsible for passing these things through security and transporting them back to the capital of Wuxia to be handed over to Qi Li. She could also send them to the big cities in the United States, where there would naturally be people from the Shanghai supermarkets to receive them. She mainly paid for things like planes, flight routes and maintenance. She handled these quite well. As for her salary, Jiang Hai gave her $1 million a year. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. The airport had already prepared a car for the cows, which was parked behind the plane. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. After helping to put the cows into the car, they left the airport through the cargo passage. Jiang Hai and the others also left in the car prepared by Prawalton. Their goal was the venue this time. Although they could stay in a better hotel, don't forget that Jiang Hai had to stay with the cows. Prawalton and Cheryl had to stay with Jiang Hai. If they came to San Antonio, they would have a chance to be alone with Jiang Hai. If they went to another hotel to stay, it would be a waste, especially since Prawalton had tortured her along the way. When they arrived at the venue, Jiang Hai and the others showed their registration information. Then the people here arranged a place for them to graze the cows and an exhibition hall. After that, Jiang Hai and the others went to a hotel prepared by the organizers. Although it was only a 4-star hotel, it was still very good. Jiang Hai spent a lot of money, so the location of his exhibition hall was good. The room he stayed in was also a suite. After entering the room with Prawalton and Cheryl, Prawalton pushed Jiang Hai onto the bed. It was obvious what they wanted to do. It was afternoon when they arrived, but when Jiang Hai and the others came out, it was already night. According to Jiang Hai, they were going to find something to eat, but Robbins Garcia and the others were unwilling to leave. After all, the exhibition was coming soon. The cows were also very important, so only 4 people went out in the end. Jiang Hai, Prawalton, Cheryl Lee, and Jiang Hai's bodyguard, Knerson Peters. It was easy for the 4 of them to go out. Jiang Hai rented an SUV and drove to the distant holy city, San Antonio. In fact, for people in China, there had always been a misunderstanding about San Antonio. It was mainly for the NBA. This was because people in the NBA always said that San Antonio was a small city. The basketball market was small and there was no economy. In the eyes of people in China, San Antonio might not be as big as Boston, Atlanta, or Oakland. But in fact, this was all nonsense. San Antonio was a big city in the United States. It was quite a big city. Texas was the largest state in the United States besides Alaska. The largest city in Texas, Houston, was the 4th largest city in the United States. As for the holy city, San Antonio, it was the 2nd largest city in Texas and the 7th largest city in the United States. Other than New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston, San Antonio was actually not afraid of anyone. Philadelphia, the 6th largest city, and Phoenix, the 5th largest city, were actually on par with San Antonio. Boston. If it was a metropolitan area, then San Antonio was far behind. However, they were talking about cities and they were using cities as a unit. Boston's urban area alone was not comparable at all. San Antonio's history could be said to be very long. It was the earliest Native American settlement in the United States. In 1691, Spanish explorers settled here. In the middle of the 18th century, it developed into the largest Native American settlement in Texas. In the middle of the 19th century, Texas and Mexico fought, including the Battle of the Alamo. At that time, the fight was very tragic. Mexico was very strong at that time. Texas was defeated, but later the Americans stood up. After Wu took over the territory of Texas, the Mexican-American War started. The United States annexed Texas and then there was the Civil War. This place became a famous cattle trading center and border city in the United States. To be honest, this city had a long history, but there were not many places that attracted people. There were only 2 reasons. One was the architecture of the Japanese people. After all, it was occupied by the Spanish in the beginning, so a large number of Spanish-style buildings were preserved. Later, it was occupied by Mexico, and many Mexican buildings were preserved here. There were very few American buildings here. However, there were many such exotic buildings. Second, the Holy River, which the people of San Antonio were proud of. The banks of the river were green and could be said to be world famous. Around the river there were restaurants, hotels, cafes, tourist souvenir shops, theaters, museums, and other buildings. However, all the buildings mentioned above were located in the river valley, which was lower than the city's street level. In other words, looking from the city, one could only see the river valley full of trees, but there were no traces of people. It was quite spectacular and it gave people a strange feeling when they walked in. Besides these 2 things, there was nothing else to see. Second, the recruitment mainly depended on the humanities. The Texas Folk Festival, beef show, rodeo competition, and so on. Every year, the San Antonio Livestock Show and rodeo competition were held here, but it was in February and lasted for 3 consecutive weeks. In February, Jiang Hai was at home, so naturally he could not come. This time, Jiang Hai participated in the livestock show held in Texas. Compared to the one held in San Antonio, the one in Texas was more popular. It was open to the whole country and lasted for a week. There were 2 kinds of competitions, the cattle competition and the rodeo competition. Both competitions started on the first day, then went through 3 days of auditions. On the 4th day, the top 16 were decided. On the 5th day the top 8 were decided. On the 6th day the top 4 were decided. On the 7th day the best cattle and the best rodeo were decided. Compared to the voting in New York, a team of experts was formed here. They went into the exhibition hall to look at the cattle and score them. Chapter 686. Do you have a grudge against the Cartwright Company? Prawalton, who was lying on Jiang Hai's chest, forced herself to calm down. She asked Jiang Hai with her eyes half closed. Jiang Hai hugged her with one hand and Cheryl Lee with the other. He took 2 deep breaths to stabilize his unstable breathing. Then he began to recall. Let's talk about this. Cartwright, the Cartwright Company is a big company in the Cartwright Company. Back then, my cowboys wanted to sell their cattle to this company. Actually, you can't blame them because they didn't know how much my cattle were worth. The people sent by this company were very arrogant. At that time, I made a bet with them to see if I could get first place in the New York State Livestock Exhibition. You know the result. Because of this bet, the company lost a lot of money. So we have a grudge. Jiang Hai smiled as he looked at Prawalton. Oh, is that so? This is a normal competition. Don't worry about them. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton closed her eyes and found a comfortable position on Jiang Hai's shoulder like a kitten. Then she leaned against him and got ready to sleep. Jiang Hai also got ready to sleep with them in his arms. After leaving the restaurant, Jiang Hai didn't know what those people said. He went to the Spurs home stadium and watched the Spurs games. He had to admit that the current Spurs were indeed one of the strongest teams in the league. Even the Fierce Dragons, one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, were beaten by them. However, looking at the current Spurs, Jiang Hai still felt that there was a problem. That was because the Spurs lacked a true offensive all-star in their current lineup. In other words, no matter how tight the opponent's defense was, he could still score. In the past, Duncan was such a person. No matter who was guarding against him, there was no way to deal with him. However, things were different now. Aldridge's offense as the core of the 2 Dirks was not very stable. His shooting ability was still quite good against the short players inside the 3-point line, but against those muscle-bound players, his offensive ability was indeed a little weak. He was not bad at playing the 4th position, but he was still a little lacking at the 5th position. Small forward Kawhi Leonard's defense was one of the best in the league, but his offense, especially when it came to attacking with the ball, was still far from good. His hit rate for a back solo was also not particularly high, and there was still room for improvement. From Jiang Hai's perspective as a fake fan, the Spurs were a strong team. However, they were not at the level of a champion. However, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After watching the game, they returned to the hotel. Of course, after returning, Knurse and Peters went to eat some supper before returning to rest together.